Okay, so let's resume with part 2. We've got our cascading drop-downs now, but we want to implement Ajax so that this update just affects this section. So probably one way of doing it is if we just put this entire table inside of an update panel. That way any updates that happen only affect what's in this panel. So above my table, I'm just going to create another ASP update panel. I'll give it an ID of update at UPD add, meaning for adding a new course, with the run at equals server. And then we'll also need a content template tag, set of tags. So I'm going to move my 2 closing tags after this entire section, our entire table. So I'm going to grab my content template, we'll bring them down here. And then I'll fix my indenting.
Wait, is it very bottom?
Yep. So I've moved the end content template and end update panel tag down so that our entire table sits inside of that one Ajax panel. So now any updates that happen, any postbacks that happen inside the update panel, right now are only targeting whatever's in this panel. It's not targeting the rest of the page. So I've just contracted my table temporarily and stuck it inside of the content template of this update panel. So if we reload now, if I pick a department, now we've got the implementation we want, right? It's no longer reloading the whole page, right? We're not jumping the user to the top, which is annoying. We're also not spending the bandwidth to repopulate that form and that, because we've got 2 database connections and 2 queries running and populating. We're running it locally, so it's not that slow, but if this was a lot of data and we're running it on a server, that could be quite slow to repopulate all that stuff. It's way faster that we're simply targeting this section.
So the difference between like this and say like JavaScript or something would be like this is actually changing it on the server side?
Well, the idea is we're calling a server-side event. Comes back to here. Normally, in order to call a server-side event, even if all we want to do is fill this drop-down, right? All we want to do is change the value here. We want to leave everything else the same. Without Ajax, it goes through this whole process, right? Our selected index change still runs on the department drop-down, so it has to make a request to the server. Well, we can't hit the server without reloading the whole page, right? We've got a request. It goes, it gets the list of courses, and then it has to reload the entire page all over again. And any code that happens on page load executes all over again, right? With this model, when we're using the XML request instead, all we get back is the data, and the rest of our page stays static. So we're not reloading all of the HTML and running all of the C# all over again.
You can't actually do that with JavaScript then? Have like cascading dropdowns without reloading the page?
You need Ajax.
You need it.
Or you can do it, jQuery has an Ajax library, so you can use jQuery, but jQuery you'll need to call the Ajax functions to do it.
So it is the same thing?
It basically is. You need to hit the, you need Ajax. Ajax is the only way you can talk to the server without doing a full load of a new page. The only way. Sure, at some point, somebody will invent a better way. But I mean, Ajax has been around since like 2003, 4. It was, I mean, like I said, Microsoft added .NET in 2005. So in the last 10, 12 years, no one's come up with a better way than using Ajax. Okay, so at the moment, this is still, for the last 10, 12 years, how we would do it. So the next thing we want to do, we need to write code on our add. So when we click add, we capture the student ID and we capture the course ID and we add a record to the enrollments table, right? We're registering this student in the selected course. So we want to add that code, but we want to use an Ajax trigger. So clicking this button rather than refreshing the whole page, we'll get that working first, and then we'll need to add Ajax. So when this button's clicked, only the grid gets updated. We don't need to do a full page refresh all over again. Okay, Tyler, question?
Don't we have to have the grade as well?
Pardon?
Grade as well? Like you have on your table where you write grade?
Well, no, because the grade is something that happens later as an update, right? You have to put a student in a course, not like they get a grade at the time they're enrolled in the course. This is when you register for a course, you know, in September, and the grade gets added later on. So we could add, you know, an edit or an update function in our grid if we wanted to. So for now, we just want to put the student in the course, so the grade's going to be empty, right? This happens, yep, I signed up, I want to take this course. So when you put your add button in, I ask you to generate the click event. So if you're missing that, you'll want to go ahead and generate that click event. Right now in my C#, I have an empty btn add click. So we want to write the code for this, and then we'll add the Ajax for it after. So we may as well connect. Excuse me. We'll create a new enrollment. So I'll create a new object of type enrollment. Oops. Right, so a new empty object. And just like we've done saves in the past, we don't need to fill all of the properties because we're going to exclude the grade property. We just need to fill the student ID and the course ID. So what student is it? What course do they want? So, sorry, so we'll set the student ID equal to, we can grab the student ID from the URL, right? We know what student we're editing. We know what student we're on. We'll just grab that student ID value from the URL and convert it to an integer. So we'll just grab the current student ID out of the URL. We'll pass that in. And the course ID come from where? How do we know what course to put them in?
The drop down.
Yeah, the selected value, not the selected index, right? Because that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll take our DDL course selected value property, which is treated as a string, so we need to do a type conversion here as well. We can just copy and paste our convert function. So we can ignore the grade property. That can be null for now. So now we'll add our new enrollment to the collection and call save changes. So this is going to save that selected course. But what else do we need to do after we stick this student in the new course? What else should happen on the page?
Update the grid.
Yeah, it should update the grid. Okay. Now, I think we've done the grid. Right now, we've done the population of the grid inside of our getStudent method. It's not terribly efficient. We don't need to populate this stuff again. So what we should probably do is move this code into a separate function, so then we can call it both from getStudent as well as the add button, right? We could repeat this code, or we could move it into a function, so we can call that function from two different
So
spots.
this code is in students.
So inside of our getStudent method, this is the code that fills the grid.
Okay.
So I'm going to cut it out of here. So we'll just fill the student data only in getStudent. I'm going to create another method called getEnrollments. I'll paste it in here, but now we're going to have to add our database connection around it. And we'll have to set our student ID variable again. So I'll just indent that code because it's going to go inside of a using block. And I'll move my ending curly brace down here. The one other thing we need to do is once again read the student ID out of the URL. Actually, no, I was sorry. I do want that. So I'll create an integer variable called student ID. So there's really no new code. We're just moving this function out of getStudent into its own function, because we want to call it both when we load the page and look up the student. We'll want to populate the grid, but then we also want to call this function after the user clicks the add button. We don't need to reload the whole page. We just need to reload the course's grid, so we can see the new course has been added to that student's record. So where we move the code from, I'll now just call getEnrollments. So we'll fill the course's grid in getStudent, and then we'll copy this function call down to the bottom of our add click. So after we put the student in a new course, it calls our getEnrollments, which populates our grid again. So I'm just going to call my function here, and if I go down to my add, which we just wrote, we'll put it in there as well. Sorry?
Can you go to the getEnrollments method?
The getEnrollments method, yep. So I didn't rewrite the query, I just moved it out of getStudent into its own function. And as Sam was suggesting earlier, we could put this in a separate class if we wanted to, if we thought we would be invoking it from other places besides this page. We could even move it to another class so that it was public.
Oh, so I shouldn't have this query in getStudent as well?
No, what we'll do, it was in getStudent, we've put it in its own function because we want to call it twice from two different places. So you could just repeat the code Or I've tried to modularize it by making it its own function, which get called from getStudent and from our addClick.
I just made it better.
Fine, doesn't matter. That'll work, still work. I was trying to make it more efficient. So let's compile. We want to make sure when we look up a student, we haven't lost the course listing. And then we'll see what happens when we try and add that student into a new course. So my grid still shows up when the page loads, as long as I have a student ID. That's good. And now if I want to put that student into another course, if I click Add, so what happened? I clicked Add, our grid didn't refresh. Did our add fail or did the refresh fail?
I think the refresh failed.
Well, let's see. If I load it again, notice my thing is here.
It worked.
So why didn't the grid refresh?
Is it in an update panel?
Right, because this is in an update panel by default. The only parts of the page that this updates is this panel. So this is where we need to use the trigger. Right. We need to specify that this event should trigger an update in this update panel. So our add works, but we don't see the grid refreshing. So we just handle this through our HTML. So in our grid, we said update mode is conditional, meaning we're not always doing it, right? When the user just picks a drop-down, we don't want this update panel to be affected. So this is where we're going to add a trigger.
Mine already does it. Without a trigger.
Yeah.
Do you have? Maybe you don't have that.
Oh, no, I don't think so. Should I?
So I'm going to add a trigger. And in here, I'm going to add an asynchronous postback trigger. We get two options, postback or asynchronous. We're doing a loading an Ajax event. So there's two properties to set up. What control triggers the update? So what control should trigger the update of the grid? Good guess. Nope.
The add button?
That's right. The add button should trigger an update here. So our control ID is btn add, and the other property is the name of the event that's attached to that control.
Click.
The click event.
Is it on click?
No, it's just click. Because here it is here. If we scroll down, there's the name of the event. So there's the object, and there's the event name. So we're breaking those up. Control and event.
Does it have to run at the server?
No, because it's not a visual, it's not a tag, it's just a property of an attribute. So now, clicking the add button should also cause an update on our grid. This is basically what Amazon's doing here, right? An event in this section also triggers updates here and here. So one section of the page can update a different section of the page, or multiple sections. In this case, this is probably its own Ajax area, and this is another one.
Why would you want to do update mode conditional?
I found a problem.
Without it, it just works.
I'll show you in just a second. So I'll load it again. I'll put this student in another course. So now it uses Ajax and the page doesn't fully refresh. Now, you could take out the update mode equals conditional, But what we don't want is, without it, Ben, yours probably also updates on any Ajax event. So if I do this, it's probably repopulating your grid as well, which is a waste of resources, right? Because this is a separate Ajax event. It causes a postback. By saying conditional, what this means is only update this grid when a postback happens inside it, or it's triggered as the target of another postback. Okay? So it will still work without that update mode equals conditional, but again, we're wasting resources by refreshing the grid on the drop-down change. There's no reason to do it. We shouldn't need to do it until this click event happens. So it's not wrong, but if we're going to use Ajax for optimizing it, may as well go all the way with it and optimize it as much as we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what happens if you want to make a new student?
Okay.
You can't add courses that those students actually made.
Right. So, how would you fix that? That's a very good point you raised.
When I place a temporary student in the database, or?
So when I click Add Student, well, we have an issue here, don't we?
No student.
What will happen if I try and add them? Is this going to throw an error?
Yeah, it threw an error for me.
Why does it throw an error if I click Add?
Because there's no student to add.
Right, we don't have a student ID yet, which is a required field in the enrollment. It's part of it's a foreign key, right? You can't have a registration in a course with no student. So we're going to get an error when that happens. So what should happen with this section if we click Add?
I think what it would do is automatically, once you get into the add page, it'll put a temporary student in the database.
Okay, that's one suggestion.
And then flag it as sort of hidden.
You could. What else could you do?
Just put it in a panel and make it visible default.
I like that suggestion. Let's take this whole section and just put it in an ASP panel.
Oh, come on.
When the page loads, if there's no student ID in the URL, let's hide this whole section. You have to create a student first before you can enroll them in a course. We need to generate them and get that student a student number. So it's a two-part process.
My switch is too hard.
So I'm going to take this whole section from my H2. I can just contract all of this. Right?
Yes.
I'm going to take those sections and indent them, and I'll put an ASP panel on here, give it an ID of PNL courses with a run at equals server attribute. And then I'll move my closing tag all the way below that entire section. So the courses subheading, the grid with the existing enrollments and the ability to add the student into a new enrollment, all that stuff will live inside of this panel. So now on page load, if postback is false, we just need to evaluate whether we have a student ID in the URL. If we do, we're editing and we want to show this. If we have no student ID in the URL, we're adding a new student, so we want this whole thing to be invisible. So I'll go all the way up to page load. So if we're not posting back, we've said if we have a student ID, get the student. Else, what should we do with our courses panel? Yeah, let's hide it. Adding a new student, so hide the courses section. Now the other thing we should probably do, what should we do with this then? Right now, our departments drop-down gets filled automatically whenever the page loads for the first time. If we're not showing the course panel, does it make any sense to populate the department drop-down if we're not going to show it to the user? No, there's no reason to spend the time and resources to connect to the database, run a query, and populate that. So we're going to move that here. So there's no point even filling that drop down if we're adding a new student, because until they save a new student, we're not going to let them use that drop down anyway. So there are some different algorithms you could use, different ways of approaching this. I find using the panel and just showing or hiding that section works pretty well. So now if I add a new student, my page should end at the Save button. If I edit, all our functionalities here. You might find it easier to break this into two separate pages. I like keeping it on one page because the form at the top and all the validation rules, I don't want to have to duplicate that stuff. So using one form for the master record I find is more efficient. We should also try, Ben, I want to come back to the point you raised earlier, which is if we're going to use Ajax on all these pages, well, why should we put the script manager on every page, right? What happens if we put the script manager on the master page instead? We should try it and make sure that it won't break our currently working Ajax functionality. Okay, it shouldn't, but we probably want to try that out. So I'll take the script manager off of my student page. I'll just cut it. I'll open up my master page. Where on here should it go? It does matter. Would be fine on top of the nav. It just has to be above what tag? There's one section here it's got to go before.
Under the container?
Yeah, on top of that content.
Yeah, it can't go after this tag because this tag then holds the individual page content, and the individual page content will have Ajax control, may have Ajax controls like an update panel. So if we put it down here after the content placeholder, if I put it here, chances are this should break my Ajax. Right? If I refresh this, now it says it needs a script manager and it's got to be before any Ajax controls get rendered. Yeah, so that's on the master page. So as long as it's above that opening content placeholder, I'm fine. I'll maybe just put it here where Ben suggested, in case we want to use it on the master page. Let's say we want to do something in the header that might use Ajax. So long as the script manager is above it, we could use an update panel or some other kind of Ajax control here. So that should fix my error. Oh, not quite. It actually wants it inside my form. So our form tag so it does need to go inside the form. Now it all works fine. Okay, and my Ajax still works on the page, right? Still doing partial page updates there, which is what we want.
Must be placed inside the form.
Now there are a whole bunch of other Ajax controls you're free to play around with. You notice, if you remember, when we installed the NuGet package, it said something like 40 controls. Yet when we went here and went to our toolbox, we only got this. So where are those 40 controls? Well, if we start typing, you can actually see them. So remember when it wrote that value in web.config, it said the prefix was Ajax Toolkit. So it's got things like accordions, charts, animations, calendars, color pickers, password strength. So there's a lot of built-in controls that we could add. I haven't used most of these. There's like an autocomplete box,
Yeah.
which is useful if we're going to do a search.
So you just jQuery one, jQuery auto.
Yeah. We can. I'm going to stick an accordion one on for a second, just so we can see what it does. I've used it before.
Now, I did notice if you download it
From
from Dev,
DevExpress,
populate
the toolbox. Good to know. So we've got, you know, a panes tab. So if we could create a pane, so you'd set up a template something like this. So just to see what this kind of looks like on our student page. I guess we'd have to play around a bit more with it.
Maybe you only need one accordion thing.
Let's see. I haven't used this for a while.
Oh my god. I thought you were going my last name. Console? It's Tesco.
There.
Thank you very much.
It's hard to see, but it works. If I click on one, it contracts one and expands the other. So we could style it. Example. So all of those tools are available to you inside of the toolkit. I'll get rid of that. You can play around with it.
You idiot. Come on.
So if you're going to take the application that you submitted for assignment 2 and you're planning on taking it and doing more with it, evolving it outside of class, looking at adding the control toolkit to your assignment and seeing some of those controls, some of those you may find use for them. And they're pretty much just like the update panel. You can just drag and drop and play around with those properties and attributes. There is also, I don't love this one, there is also a progress. So let's say we want to run some process on the server that's going to take a while, like run a search. We can get update progress to show an animated GIF. Guys, can you carry that conversation outside, please? Thanks. So you can use an update progress, so it will pop up an animation, something loading when the process starts, and it will automatically disappear when that process ends. One other thing to keep in mind is that Ajax can mess with our postbacks a little bit. Let me show you how. Okay, so I'm going to enroll this student.
Hacking Ajax, here we go.
So I can delete. What did you notice? Right. Okay. When does our jQuery confirmation, when does that run? It loads on the document ready, which is when the entire page loads. Because we use Ajax for that event, right? When I do it for the first time, I'm going to have my event attached, right? It's there. But as soon as I run an Ajax event, which only triggers a partial page update, right? I just ran an Ajax post. So we've got to be mindful. So what we probably want to do is move that little JavaScript maybe into a function. We're going to call it when the page loads, but we're also going to have to call it again after. Yeah, it should probably be called here. So we can attach a JavaScript event. You know, if we said btn add.attributes.add.
Isn't this just going to call it when you first load the page too then?
Yeah, we probably want to remove it. So here, and we could call some JavaScript function that would attach it. So we probably would want to do that instead. So you do have to be mindful that if things are running, particularly with JavaScript on page load doesn't really happen if we're only reloading part of the page with an Ajax request. Page load only happens before our Ajax requests run. So that is a little bit of a gotcha that you have to watch out for when you're using Ajax.
A little bit of a captcha.
Does anybody have any other questions about anything that we've done today or about implementation of Ajax with .NET?
Pretty cool.
That's neat. That's powerful.
Thanks, Bob.
Years of practice.
Yeah, very slick.
So what they did on my co-op was they had like part of a form was like they had like different tabs.
Yep.
And so like you could go to the different tabs and it would save you permission, and like you could save them and save them in the database, but it wouldn't actually refresh the page.
Right.
So
Ajax is a perfect candidate for that, for
and
doing that.
Would that thing with like the different tabs, I don't know what you call it, but would that be like an actual Ajax control?
I'm pretty sure it is. I think it's in the toolkit. So the accordion is vertical. Tab container. That's the control. So you could use a tab container. That would work. So that would be efficient. So then you could save just the content in the one tab without reloading all the others. If there was a lot of data to load, that would be much faster. So if you looked at the code, that's probably what they're using, is a tab container.
Question.
Yep.
Would Ajax count as bonus marks if you did it on the site?
Yep.
So it's before this lesson?
Yep. As long as you learned it on your own and implemented it, yes.
Ajax and ours.
Did you use the toolkit, or did you do it a different way?
I used the toolkit, I had script manager and then updated that on.
Okay. Yep. I'd count that for bonus mark, sure.
Now, if we didn't use it, are there bonus marks there as well?
Yes, they're called negative bonus marks.
Right on. Sweet.
Okay. So that's everything I wanted to do with Ajax for today. So we can wrap it up a little bit early. So next week, what we're going to do is a couple things. We're going to play around with Web API. So we're going to build out a .NET web service, talk about using JSON, and we'll look at building out a RESTful web service using .NET. So first we'll hard code some data, and then what we want to do is build a separate API. We can host it on Azure so that another application could access our course data, make requests to our web service, which will query the database and send back that data in JSON format. Okay. So we'll play around with that stuff next week. We'll also do a bit of exam review / lab 5. So you'll have an in-class lab, and that will be part of your exam review. Okay, so you'll basically submit your exam review at the end of class. You'll be working with 1 or 2 other people, and that'll be your lab 5 mark.
Did you mention that the exam is not practical?
The exam is not practical.
What?
Really?
Oh, no.
Question and answer only, open book. Okay, but lots of questions about code. Right? What does this code do? What kind of error would you get here? How would you fix this? What's missing from this line of code? Lots of questions like that. Okay. So the exam is not next week, it's in 2 weeks. I will be here.
You will be here?
The lab catch up, right?
Yes. If you are going to submit any lab that you haven't done, I need it before next Wednesday's class. So maximum of 2 marks out of 2.5. You can still submit any labs you didn't do. I want them before next Wednesday. Okay. And also, if you are hoping to get the bonus marks for your fitness tracking and log, I'll make a spot on Blackboard. You also have to submit those by next Wednesday as well. Okay.
Take a picture if you haven't.
I'll make submission.
Yeah, if you
Spots on
take a picture.
Where's the submission?
No, if I've seen you that many times, no.
Where's the submission?
You just have to make a submission. I will make a submission spot in the assignments tab.
Is there marks for just pictures, or do we have to
Yeah.
make the whole web app and it's like all?
That's an additional mark. 1 month if you just upload, 1 mark if you upload the pictures, 1 mark if you build it as a .NET application. Okay, additional bonus mark. And if I've seen you in there, you don't have you don't have to submit the pictures, but you have to make a submission saying, yes, you've seen me in there. And I'll give you your bonus mark for that.
You've seen me in there.
I have seen you in there. Okay, that's it for today.